You're listening to the Speaking Tongues podcast. I'm your host, El Charisse. Each week, I sit down to a conversation with multilinguals where we discuss and celebrate language, life, and culture through our own perspectives. Episode 127, Speaking Fiji Baat. Hello, language lovers. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Speaking Tongues, the podcast in conversation with multilinguals. Today, I'm so honored to have this conversation about Fiji Baat, also known as Fiji Hindi, with Ange and Ash of the NoTies1879 Podcast. I think Ange and Ash are so very cool and so extremely chill, and in this episode, they talk to us about the painful history of indentured labor in Fiji that led to many Indians from all over India being brought to Fiji, which you can hear more about this history, this specific history, on their podcast. We talk about Indo-Fijian culture and what cultural elements, including religion, affect the spoken language. They talk to us about some of the other Indian languages besides Hindi that can be used in Fiji Baat. We discuss the structure of Fiji Baat and how Kiviti and English words are also used within the language. Now, one big takeaway from this conversation, which cannot be ignored, is our discussion about identity and reframing their identity of being twice removed Indo-Fijians living in Canada. Ange and Ash talk with us about the journey to reconnecting with their Fijian-ness and understanding how to define it. The journey, as you know, listeners, is also a part of the story. And again, I encourage all of you listeners to subscribe and listen to their podcasts so you can gain a deeper understanding of Indo-Fijian culture for yourselves. Big thank you to Ash and Ange for having this amazingly cool conversation and for sharing your language and culture with all of us. If you enjoy episodes of Speaking Tongues, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Speaking Tongues podcast on Apple Podcasts, and like and subscribe on YouTube so that other language lovers like ourselves can find the show. And if you've been a long-time listener of the show or even a recent listener, you can now pledge ongoing support for the show on buymeacoffee.com or on patreon.com. Special shout out to Speaking Tongues' recent supporters and patrons Heidi L, Linnea H, Pat N, and Yari A. For just $5 a month, you'll have access to excerpts of this conversation that did not make it to the full published episode. And as you know, I wrote a book. My food zine of international language and cuisine, Taste Buds Volume 1, is available now for purchase. Check social media for the sneak peek inside the book and make sure that you purchase one for yourself and one for your friends. Links to all platforms are in the show notes. Okay, let's chat. Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Tongues. I'm Elle, and I'm here with Ange, with Ash, and I'm so excited to have you both for this conversation. How are you both doing today?
Great.
Really great.
Excited to be on somebody else's show for once, actually.
Yeah, no kidding. Thank you so much for reaching out, Elle. We're excited. I'm not going to lie, I'm a little nervous because it's interesting to be on the other side, but stoked nonetheless.
Yeah, I like to start each episode with the same question, and that is, what is your first language, and which languages have you learned to speak?
That's a tough one because it
Kind
both
of.
happened at the same time. So I would say that the first language was probably Hindi because it was just spoken in the household, right? And then English because we live in Canada and that's just what we speak. So
Yeah.
that would be how it goes. And then I don't know, throughout high school we've kind of
Dabbled with Spanish.
Yeah, and stuff like that just because it was in the curriculum. But
Yeah.
first language, Fiji Baat Hindi.
Yeah. Fiji Hindi or Fiji Baat is, I would say, my first language. And then English, specifically Canadian English, specifically Western Canadian English is our second, I guess. But, you know, the language that we probably use predominantly today. And then growing up, French was in the curriculum. I couldn't even recall any to get by, to be honest, at this point. But Spanish was something that, we both definitely pursued in high school, and we could get by. Like, I've been to Mexico before, and I'd be able to figure it out. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cooler, too.
You caught my attention at Western Canadian English.
Yeah.
What are we talking about there?
It's different than the UK English.
Well, it's different than UK, and it's different than even the eastern side, because
Eastern Canada?
just because
for sure.
Canada is, this melting pot, as we like to say, of so many different people from different origins of like Europe and Asia and everywhere. And so on the eastern side, the not only the dialect but the accent is a bit different. It's more European. I've met
think that they're speaking, or sorry, you could think that they're from Ireland.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like in places like Newfoundland, Labrador, people speak completely different. They speak like they're from, Ireland,
Scotland.
I'm generalizing here. I'm not
For
saying
sure.
that they sound like that. I don't need any angry newfies yelling at me. Okay.
but yeah, that is true, and that was something that I learned when I started kind of checking out the rest of Canada, and traveling to different provinces and meeting folks from other provinces as well. And you can just tell the way that they say a certain word. So for example, the OU sound is something that is quite indicative of where you're from. So when I say the word about, I just say about. But I've certainly heard some folks pronounce it like about, and as soon as you hear that, you know that
they're more Eastern.
Yeah, and so so it's just little nuances like that. Yeah,
you can tell when somebody's from back east.
Or the Maritime.
Like, you're from Ontario.
Yeah,
or you're from Halifax. Just they sound different.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. This is going to have
right?
to be another episode.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating place, this country, because I don't, yes, it's, we talk about its diversity and its multiculturalism, but even just the speak of it, like just the sounds of the different dialects of English. And then once you mix like the French Canadian aspect into it as well, then it's like a whole other thing. So
that's a whole other thing.
It's a fascinating place.
Okay, sorry, we didn't actually, or I don't actually know. Where are you speaking from right now?
I'm speaking from New York City, the Big Apple.
Okay.
New York.
That's cool.
City where dreams. Is that how it goes? Yeah. Nice. Oh, man, that's so cool.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It can be cool and it can be irritating, as I'm sure every city can be.
That's cool. Yeah, so
are you what we would refer to as a native New Yorker, or
I am born and raised, been here my whole life.
Nice. That's cool.
And there are so few of us left, I think. So I'm really quick to tell people, like, I was born here. The city is a part of me, and it's it's kind of like my hometown is New York City, and so many people's hometown is not New York City. So I take a lot of pride in that.
That's
good. Yeah.
Let's just jump right in.
Sure.
Fiji Baat, your first language, Fiji Baat. Now, I did my research for this episode, loved falling into every layer of the rabbit hole that I fell into. And I am just like so fascinated, and I just always enjoy the opportunity to learn so much more. For my listeners who may not be aware of what we're talking about and have not done their research because they're listening to this, and this is maybe for some people the first time. Tell us about Fiji Baat. Now, I also heard you say Hindi, Fiji Hindi. So what does the word Baat signify? Why are we talking about Hindi? Also, let our listeners know and orient us.
Cool. Great question. And it's just like every question kind of similar to this about our culture that we receive. It is so complicated. And so I'm going to try to, reduce the complexity of it as much as I can. But it's, I was thinking about this a bit last night because I was thinking about what I wanted to say about this And it's interesting how so much of our culture, of Fijian culture, Indo-Fijian culture, including our language, is so influenced by the story of, not just migration, but our past of indentured labor and also religion. And so all of these things are a big part of how it is that the dialect came to be. And so Hindi itself, what we refer to as traditional Hindi, right? Quote unquote traditional, or, how some folks like to call it proper, which is a term that we don't like to use these days. But, traditional Hindi is from India. And within India, there are like hundreds of different dialects based off of, the region that they're in. And there's also other languages that influence Hindi itself, like Urdu, Sanskrit. All of our religious scripture is written in Sanskrit, and other languages like Bhojpuri and Awadhi that are from specific regions where our ancestors came from. And so this is important because we are descendants of Indian indentured laborers. And so what happened, post slavery was that the British Empire they still needed free or cheap labor. And so within their empire, they had India, and they looked to India to provide those laborers under the guise of this, system that was going to be really great. Which, turned out not to be at all. And a lot of these Indians were unfortunately, manipulated into leaving their homeland and going to other parts of the empire where indentured labor was needed. And one of those places was Fiji. And so you have, again, this melting pot of Indians that speak different dialects of Hindi and also Awadhi and Bhojpuri predominantly, which come from, the northern parts of India, current day Uttar Pradesh, even Nepal. And they ended up in Fiji, and they had to figure out a way to communicate amongst each other. So that is where Fiji Baat came from. The word Baat itself, we literally translate to
Speak.
Yeah, speak or talk. So that's kind of what that is in a nutshell. And so Fiji Baat is certainly a dialect of Hindi that includes these elements of a melting pot of languages from India.
Right.
Not just from but they're like, I don't know, mom and dad use like KVT words as well.
Right.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
which is the native Fijian language.
Yeah.
The KVT people, like, so like, saying bula is like a
Yes.
greeting in Fiji. Everybody says that, and that's a native Fijian word.
Yes,
actually.
yeah.
So like, it's not just limited to like
Absolutely.
India, but I mean, it mostly like, I mean, when we speak it, it's like, very, very brown.
Yes.
Right. But then there's all these like other words that you hear that don't sound anything like it, and they're like actually KVT words,
Yeah.
because they grew up on this island, and you had to kind of
communicate with each other.
communicate with each other, but then you're also like taking from everybody's language.
Yeah.
It's also represented in our food too. Like,
Yeah.
cuisine's just more tropical island too.
Exactly.
Our Hindi is also a bit more tropical island in that sense.
Right. Yeah. And so there's also elements. That's a really good point, is that there's also elements of indigenous Fijian language and also English as well. There's certain words that we don't have a word for. So
British
we just
English too.
Yeah. So
they call trucks lorries in Fiji, which is in English, right? Which is what they say in the UK. They call a truck a lorry. My dad calls a truck a lorry.
Mm-hmm.
I call a truck a lorry because of that.
Yeah. And there's certain words that I didn't actually realize were English words until I grew up, because, when I hear my dad say something like lori, right? Like we say it we say it with our Indian accent, like lori. And then, we'd be watching movies and like someone would say lorry. And I'm like, why are they saying that Hindi word? But it's not a Hindi word. It was an English word that we just kind of adopted and, chopped and screwed a bit to work for us.
Yeah. There's a lot of English words that we take and chop and screw and are pronounced in a Indian way,
Yeah.
so to speak. Like the word for hospital is hospital, but it's literally just the word hospital said
Yeah.
like
Hospital.
hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like, we have like weird words like that too. Motor, which is the word for car, is just the word motor
Yeah.
pronounced in,
Yeah. Pronounced
yeah,
how we would.
how we
So
would, yeah.
yeah.
So, there's also things like that too, which is why a lot of people go, "Oh, you're just speaking in slang and it's a bunch of nonsense." And it's just like, bro, we have our own thing because we are our own people. So GTFO with that.
I always say on the show that that I love languages that come from different places and have made their own language because I think it says so much about the resilience of a people. And I just think that, I mean, all languages made up, right? But the
Mhm.
legitimacy of a language is determined by a few people. I
Right.
will leave that there. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so, especially with my show, what I love to do is I love to talk about creoles and pigeons and, other like lingua francas that come because, like I said, they speak to a resilience of a people. And for me, the language itself is like living history because it shows you like how far people have come, where they've come from, and what they value. And I just think that it's so special to have that. I mean, unfortunately, coming from a devastating circumstance, but it shows that, people wanted to hold on to their home. They wanted to hold on to their lineage, their culture, their values. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, no, thank you so much. And yeah, Ellie, you're totally right. I agree with you in that, I feel like, you know, knowing sort of the origins of a language is understanding a story. And, we certainly experienced a lot of comments growing up and even to this day about the illegitimacy of our language and therefore our culture and our people. And that happens when people don't understand the story behind that language, because if there was more of that, then I think people would, feel a bit differently, which is why we're all here, talking about it right now. But yeah, there's, someone out there has, made themselves the authority on what a legitimate language is and what it isn't. And to me, that's quite a classist statement. But, for us, we just kind of know that whenever there's a different dialect or a different accent of something, there's a story behind that. Even, previously speaking about the Eastern Canadian accent, right? There's a story there. There's a reason that's like that. Those individuals speak in that dialect and in that accent. And these are all important stories for us to know instead of just, jumping to, our prejudgments and being like, well, why is it like that? That's not real.
Exactly. Exactly. But tell us about the language itself. And, I don't really want to make like an A and B comparison with Hindi because I don't think that's fair. But I'd love to know just a little bit about how the language is structured and how you're forming sentences. Is like, tell us about the cadence of the language. Is it gendered? Is it agglutinative? Tell me all the good stuff.
Yeah. So similar to a lot of, Asian and, typically Indian languages, it is quite gendered. And again, which is very connected to um, the religion itself, right? Us being Hindu specifically, we're Hindus, and it's quite gendered. There's, similar to, when we were learning Spanish, I remember when we're getting into the, grammar and vocab and how to spell and how to conjugate verbs and stuff.
Masculine and feminine.
Yeah, I certainly learned. I was like, oh, this is similar to what we know at home, where the way a word ends or the way a certain thing, a certain word ends, signifies whether you are talking to a man or woman or speaking about a man or woman. Absolutely.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I will say that you know not wanting to draw too many comparisons, you know, as you said, but compared to, you know, Hindi itself, like Hindi in India, we certainly use a lot less words, I would say. Like there's, you know, we have this reputation of being very slangy, and to me that's just efficiency. We say less and get you know, the same thing across.
Totally.
Yeah. And so we have a few
100%.
words that are kind of mashed together. It has a lot of, because of all of the influences from other cultures and languages, there's just these kind of mishmash words that are considered slangy, but just like make it more efficient for us to, I don't know, form a sentence and get out. I would say that like our sentences aren't even like sentences sometimes, you know, they're not even, it's quite challenging to literally translate a sentence into English, because it's just not the same, right? Like I might not say it's raining today. I'm not going to say that. The literal translation in Hindi would be,
I don't even know what it is.
Rain happening.
Yeah.
Like like rain happening, you know? And
Yeah.
Yeah.
You would just say like rain falling.
Yeah.
The thing to say would be pani barse hai.
Yeah, which
means
water
falling now.
Yeah.
Or that's hair, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like quite like, it doesn't make sense if you say it in English, but it makes sense. It's kind of weird to explain. I don't know.
Absolutely. Which then also makes it challenging to write it in Hindi as well. And so when we were younger, we actually learned, alongside a few of our cousins and family friends who we grew up with, we were taught by some of the elders in our family how to read and write in Hindi in the alphabet. But it was not our Hindi. It was not Fiji Baat. It was Indian Hindi, which
like a
kind of made
standard.
which kind of made it challenging to, you know, we're learning how to read and write a language that we don't predominantly speak at home.
Right.
You know, when, you know, for example, when we watch Bollywood movies, that is the Hindi that, you know, we were learning. But that's
I need to turn on subtitles for that.
Yeah, but you know, it's not what we predominantly speak at home. And some of us have like an easier time understanding that language based off of how much, you know, Fiji Baat we've spoken and been spoken to in our lives. You know, some need subtitles, some don't. Just the writing out of Fiji Baat it's not really a thing. Like we're not really able to do that with Hindi characters.
Yeah, you have to do it with English letters.
Yeah.
With the English, and that's a haywire.
And it's not
so haywire.
helpful at all. It's not very good.
It doesn't make, it's up for interpretation. Like, you can read it and you could be like, what does that even say? Like, what is he trying to say to me right now?
Absolutely. Because you're not sure which syllable to like exaggerate or not. You know, you don't know like what's supposed to be said hard or soft.
Yeah. There you go.
It's
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar like to how like the Viking language didn't really have too many written forms either. Like it had the runes, but like that was really it. Like, and it's hard to translate that into a sentence. Like I don't know. I have friends who know the language. I don't even really know. Like I have friends who know how to read it, and they say it's like very difficult, and it doesn't really. It's similar to art. Like it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't really translate over. It's really hard. Yeah.
It's kind of what I was talking about too. What we were saying about the history of the language itself, because like, for example, if you're in a situation where you are trying to talk to someone who doesn't speak your dialect, water falling is like gonna get the point across, right? Because it's like you don't have the nuance to say to this person and for them to understand like, oh, it's gonna be, you know, 58, a little bit balmy, slightly overcast. No. You know, you might not even know how to say like bring an umbrella or bring something to cover yourself because it might rain later like it might rain later today. Like that's too much. But water falling is like getting to the point. So it's the conveyance of information that like lasted, I would imagine, and that was born out of necessity. So,
Yeah.
and I know that's just one example that you gave, but that's what it's saying to me, that like this is a language that maybe did grow out of necessity because people, if something dangerous is coming your way, you don't have time to really say like, you know, maybe like run a little faster or get out of the
Right.
way or something.
Mhm.
You have to just say like move or
Mhm.
something like
Or
that.
run,
So
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And just even just thinking of that word L, run, right? Is that, that is an example of, a word, a verb that is going to be said differently based off of like what's going on and who's around, and also I like where you are, right? I know that I've certainly heard it in our dialect in a form that, would be technically Fiji Baat, but also not everyone says it like that. And this is where the religion aspect comes into play, because when even in Fiji, right? So we have, we had these Indian indentured laborers that were, brought over in 1879, and within that there were Hindus, there were Muslims, there were Christians, there were Sikhs, and based off of the religion that you are, your dialect of Fiji Baat. Now we kind of get a little complicated. The way that you speak Fiji Baat is going to be slightly different, because when we speak Fiji Baat as Hindus, we are speaking mainly with Hindi words. If there's a Muslim person, a Muslim Fijian person who's speaking Fiji Baat, they will use more Urdu words because their scripture is written more in this language. And so it's really fascinating when you're in conversations with people and maybe you don't know who they are and they, use a certain word. Well, okay, now you know that, where their origins lie because of how they're speaking that. But again, you're only going to know that if you, understand the intricacy of that.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were saying that, like, so we have friends who, like we're Hindus and our Fiji friends are Muslims. So, like, whenever they speak, so, like, our friend Rizwan, the archaeologist, who you may have heard on our shows, but, he speaks in Hindi, and even when he wrote stuff on the exhibit plaques, you could see, like, oh, this guy is Muslim. When we knew that going into it, but you could really see, like, and whenever mom and dad have actually in the past spoken to people, they've actually picked out based on the words they were saying in the Hindi that they were Muslim or
Or
Hindu. Hindu, yeah. So yeah, it's kind of interesting actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been more. I have a coworker, from Fiji. He's Muslim. We both speak Hindi to each other, Fiji Hindi to each other at work. But ever since I've been getting more in tune with my culture, because when we started doing this podcast, that was when I kind of started my whole thing. Like, so I'm learning as I go, right? So like, I've been kind of learning on the job as well, and like I've been also noticing, like whenever Fayaz speaks to me, he's using different words because he's Muslim and he's using Urdu words, and then like right,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
and then whenever I say, like he doesn't, I don't know what the word for. Like, he doesn't call his aunt and uncle Fua and Fufa like I do,
absolutely.
Like, he uses different words.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting to see.
Even just how we address people, how we, refer to our family members, our aunts and uncles.
That's
it's
a big
different.
giveaway right there. Whenever you hear somebody talking, whenever you hear the different words, you're just like, oh, okay, you're like, from this part, your
Muslim.
ancestors were from this part of India, like, back then. And so you must be, Muslim or whatever.
Or that you know, practice. And again, we're going to complicate it more, or you have a specific sect of your religion that you practice, right? And so, for example, in our household, we are predominantly a North Indian form of Hindu, simply because our dad's origins are in North India, Uttar Pradesh province. Our mom is South Indian, so Madras. And so those two sects of Hinduism are different, and those two regions speak the language differently and use different words to address people. And so we know that if we're in a household where we hear someone, you know, referring to like a, you know, an aunt and uncle, again, it's a dead giveaway. We know what culture or which region they identify with predominantly, and what sect of Hinduism as well that they predominantly practice.
You guys beat me to that question, because that was definitely something. No. That was definitely something I was curious about. Like, because, you know, we know India is so varied. And so I would imagine with all these people being forced into another part of the world, that they would not really have so much in common linguistically. So I was wondering, like, how the language developed, and, you know, based on religion or based on, you know, your place of origin. Does it create a thing where people generally understand each other, or don't really understand each other?
Yeah, I would say generally understand each other.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
100%, yeah.
There is, absolute general understanding. And also, I think the identifying of community as well. I think that plays a big part into it as well, is, you know, when you know, hear a certain dialect, or you know, are addressed in a certain way, you know, because there's also, like, of course, you know, a signal of respect when you know, use certain terms and identifiers for elders or otherwise. But yeah, I think that there is always a general understanding. And then, you know, when we hear and we understand, then we also interpret, okay, these are the origins of this person. This is likely the household that they grew up in, that was informed by, you know, this parent of this background.
So is it where you kind of know a little bit of words from each one, because you have to, like, constantly, you know, when you hear the word, you have to know, like, okay, this is an Urdu word that was in. So you're knowing already within this language, you're knowing other languages and other signifiers that can
Yeah.
facilitate a conversation. That's so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting because I think that when we were younger, we didn't really understand that. We were just like, this is just what they say, and we say differently. Or, oh, they actually use the same words that we do. And we just thought that there was, like, many ways to say the same thing. And of course, you know, it's not until we've grown up and, you know, started digging into our, you know, background and heritage where we're like, no, this is actually quite intricate and nuanced. And the story and of the origins of how this came to be is so fascinating to us.
Yeah, definitely. In Fiji, and knowing that there is also English spoken and there's also indigenous language spoken in Fiji. With Fiji Baat, how are people using it amongst non people of non Indo Fijian descent? Like, is there any mixing of the language? Is there any code switching that happens? Is it a language where maybe you speak it, like, with your own community, and then when you're, like, out with non Indo
Mm-hmm.
Fijians, you're
Yo,
just
Yeah,
we
speaking
can
English,
use
or, like, how
our
does that break
friend.
down?
We can
that's
use
a good
our
question.
friend as an example. Well, I don't know. You say your thing first, because you always got the smart answer first.
Well, well, okay. So this is a good question, and I want to start off by saying, like, we did not grow up in Fiji, unfortunately.
Right.
But we have a pretty good understanding and idea, because, you know, I have been there as an older teen and was able to experience it. But, you know, English is sort of the default in Fiji,
Yeah.
for sure, because it is, you know, part of the Commonwealth, part of the British Empire. And so English is certainly the default. It is very broken English. You know, for example, like I'm not gonna have trouble understanding anyone in English when I'm there, but someone from here who is not an Indo-Fijian person or, has been exposed to immigrants in general is probably going to have a challenging time understanding folks who speak in English there. There has been quite a weaving of, the Fiji Baat and Indigenous Fijian into each other. Yeah. And so, we certainly use Indigenous Fijian words and also vice versa. And I certainly experienced when I was there that when someone sees you and, kind of identifies who you are, they'll speak to you in that language. Yeah. And so our dad, unfortunately, we didn't learn, but our dad and mom a bit, they know how to speak the Indigenous Fijian language because that's who they grew up around and they needed to communicate. And so, fluently they can speak it, they can get by, they still remember it. It was not something that was passed down to us, unfortunately.
Would have been cool.
Yeah, it would have been cool. And I think that while English is the default, it is not necessarily practiced as the default all the time. I just think that, I've encountered my family when I was there speaking to Indigenous Fijians in their language when they go to the store or the farm or whatever, and also vice versa. And I also experienced myself, going into a store and, I was looking for a shirt of a specific size. And I was like, oh, is it in this size? And the woman who was working there was an Indigenous Fijian woman. And she said, oh, we don't have it in Fiji Baat to me. And I was like, oh, cool. I don't have to speak English here. I can just talk in Hindi. And so I think it definitely varies on where you go and, who you meet. But I think everyone just speaks everything there.
Yeah.
To suit the environment and to suit the place. And I don't know. I think that's kind of beautiful.
Yeah. I don't know. It's weird. The English there is weird too. So my sister said it was broken, but they always have like native, Kaviti words in there too. And I feel like it's kind of a 60-40 thing. It's 60% Kaviti maybe sometimes and 40% English. And then they'll just the way. So our cousins in Edmonton, they grew up on the island and they I don't know, they're like island boys, right? They hung around KVT people and they just have when they speak English, they always have this more KVT way of speaking English because they're always like, "Hey, boy, what's up?" It's that, "Hey, boy, what are you doing over there?" They just have this way of saying it, and it just sounds slightly different, and it's just you are an island boy for sure, And then they throw in the KVT words, and it's just I don't know. There's just a different way of speaking English and KVT and mixing it all together, and just you kind of know everything, like my sister said.
Yeah.
Accommodate everybody.
And again, those English words, hospital and other things are, built into the way we'll form a sentence. And so one of the English words that is used a ton in Fiji is set.
Yeah, right. Set.
So set just means if I ask you if you're set, it means how are you doing, or are you okay, or are you good, kind of thing. And so you might see your friend on the street or something, and you'll be in Hindi we'll say set hai, which means are you set, and then they'll be ekdam set hai, which is I'm really set, which just means I'm good. And that is again, a dead giveaway of a Fijian islander. And again, just built, so woven into the fabric of this language. You couldn't have it without using this English word.
Yeah, when a bunch of dudes are hanging out drinking Nagona, you'll hear, "Right, set here, boy."
Yes.
Yeah, you'll be set here, right, set here, boy.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times, as a youngster sitting around, with my dad and, all his pals, and they were drinking Nagona, and they say that, and it's just, that's just such a, I don't know, it's just how we say, "Hey, what up, man?"
Yeah.
How you doing? How I talk to my friends at work, it's just that
Yeah.
It's that way of speaking.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like if someone
cool.
asks us how we are, like we'll say right here, which is
Right.
like I'm all right. Or and and also something that came to mind was that like my dad calls his homies partner. Partner is also
that's
a
thing.
word that is built into the fabric of our language, but you know, he says it like partner, right? So so, you know, we couldn't have these things without the English being built into it. And it came, you know, it came out of this necessity of, you know, having to communicate with each other and the indigenous Fijians. And now it's just a thing. Like we can't not have it.
I love that. I'm gonna tell you, like, I try really hard not to make comparisons on this show because, you know, this is your moment, it's your story, but we are having a conversation.
Yeah,
so
no,
I just do want to share this. One thing I love about language that's spoken on an island by people of color, Black people, Indian descended people, Asian, is that the way that we greet each other. Now, my family is Caribbean, so this is why when I'm
Cool.
listening to you, I'm like, I'm hearing things that I recognize. I'm hearing cadences that I recognize. I'm hearing exuberance that I recognize. And I just find it like, especially when I'm having these conversations with people from different parts of the world, it's always someone from an island. And the way that they greet one another is like, there's a common thread there. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's like British colonization. I don't know if it's just, you know, the the island life. I don't know what it is, but it's like I talked to somebody from Singapore, and the way that he was saying that in Singlish that they greet one another, it just had that same like like I can't even put my finger on it. It's just, or maybe it's just something that I love to hear, so it makes me it makes me happy that
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
noticing
no.
it.
You're nailing it. And I totally identify with that too, because I just feel like, you know, all island people just have this affinity with one another. Like
Right.
we
Yeah.
just do. And for some reason, you know, even though, you know, we're on these like different, like opposite parts of the world, we have like figured out this way to speak and
Be chill about it.
yeah, and like, but also just like, you know, form this culture that is this blend of other cultures, and somehow they're so similar to each other, right? And you know, in the example of, you know, the Caribbean culture, like it's the same history, right? Indentured laborers were taken there
Right.
as well, and you know, unfortunately, you know, something that I kind of actually want to touch on is that, you know, unfortunately, we hear from a lot of our Indo-Caribbean brothers and sisters is that the language was lost, and the you know, they predominantly speak English and they speak it in a Caribbean accent, and there's some Hindi words here and there that are kind of peppered in, certain things that they know that are said with more of a English or Caribbean accent and are not you know, are kind of like unrecognizable to us sometimes because of the form that it's used in, or you know, how they've structured their sentence. But you know, we're very grateful that that's something that, you know, our ancestors were able to hold on to, was the language, and, you know, making it our own. The one thing that, you know, I will say that I've kind of forgotten to touch on, and I want to make sure I say it, is that our mom's origins are in South India. So, you know, Madras, and where Tamil and Telugu were languages there. And so our grandma, our mom's mom, and her mom, they spoke Tamil because that's where they were from South India. And that was unfortunately a language that was not passed down. And it wasn't something that was built into a lot of Fiji Baat, because when indenture first started in 1879, it wasn't until about 1904-5ish where South Indians were then also began to be brought over, and Fiji Baat began to be established already. And so I guess there wasn't a need seen for, you know, this language to get passed down, which is so unfortunate, because that also is an amazing, beautiful language, and it is not a lot of South Indians in Fiji, unfortunately, speak it because and so that was a bit of, cultural erasure that South Indians in Fiji experienced, was the loss of that language.
Yeah. Wow. This is so interesting. This is really interesting. No, really, like I'm just like trying to not ask you 900 questions because
Ask away. No,
I
this
do
is
want
amazing.
to I do want to know as far as the diaspora, which you are both living a part of within your communities. Other Indo-Fijian diasporas, I would imagine maybe closer to Fiji, like maybe New Zealand or Australia, etc. Um, do you notice any changes, or if you've interacted with these communities, have you noticed any changes in the way you communicate the language, or any differences, similarities in cultures that have been retained in the diaspora wherever people may be currently living?
Good question. Honestly, like for me, our experience is limited, but for me, I've been to Australia before, and like a bunch of different places around Australia where Indo-Fijians are. I have not been to New Zealand, but I think the short answer is no. Like, we're the same in the diaspora. It's the language is the same, the culture is the same, the addressing of one other, the using the other languages within it to form a sentence. It is the same. The only thing that's different for us being here is that our community here in BC, and specifically in the lower mainland of British Columbia, is not very big. The Indo-Fijian community here is not huge at all, and there isn't necessarily a place that you can go where it is predominantly Indo-Fijian. And I say that because here in the lower mainland, I always say that we are quite racially segregated. There's a city where there is, lots of like East Asian people, and there's a city where there are a lot of South Asians, predominantly Punjabi speaking Sikh individuals. And then, we're in a very white place, and there's, another city that has a lot of people of Middle Eastern descent. And so when it comes to us, we don't necessarily have that place. However, we know that in places in the South Pacific, there are cities where you go and everyone is Indo-Fijian and they're all speaking in Fiji Baat, which is wild to us. Like, that's wild to me because I'm like, I could never imagine that. And I
like where?
So in like New Zealand, in like Auckland, there's there's a huge Indo-Fijian population. So in these, twice removed diasporas that are closer to Fiji, where a lot of Indo-Fijians went, there's these communities where everyone is an Indo-Fijian, and we just don't know what that's like.
Road trip? Let's go.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, we need to, because I know that I anticipate the heavy emotion that I think I would feel just being feeling like I was, actually a part of something. Yeah.
Yeah. In the Indo-Fijian community where you live, what are we celebrating? What do we get together and do? How do we have fellowship and community?
Diwali.
Good question. Yeah.
And like today is Shivratri, so we have pujas today, which are prayers.
So different like religious things specifically is how we gather, and again, based off of your specific sect of Hinduism, you're gonna celebrate different things, holidays, pray to different gods, attend the mandir, or our temple on different things. Our mom actually just came back from the mandir. And just in terms of like the community and us gathering, our experience growing up in a white town was a bit different and removed from other family, friends, and cousins that we have here. simply because we were, away in this white community as opposed to in a predominantly brown community in the mix of it all. And so, things that we've experienced are even our own community here, you know, judging our legitimacy because we grew up in a white town. And so, we do what we know best, and we practice what we can, and we know best based off of the teachings of our parents. Of course, Diwali is a very big, that's our New Year's, that's our big festival of lights. And it's, very important to us. And we, have a big thing, and we invite, friends and family over. And it has become, I would say, in the last few years, I think Diwali has certainly become more of a mainstream topic. It is, acknowledged in, at least here and in Canada. I think it certainly is acknowledged. I think this past Diwali, we had a lot of politicians who were not brown, acknowledging it, and wishing us all a happy Diwali and stuff, which is nice, right? Because for us, I think we kind of felt like growing up, like, oh, this is like a weird thing. Like, we don't want to tell people about it. I don't want to, I don't want to share my culture with them because they're going to judge it. I don't want to wear my traditional dress. I, don't want to do these things. Whereas now, that certainly flipped and changed a bit for sure. But yeah, I would say a lot of our things are surrounded around religious holidays. And now actually what we're doing more is we want to celebrate some national identifiers, or national holidays, I guess, as well. And so, October 10th is Independence Day. And so we recognize Independence Day here because it's important to us. And then something that we actually just started this year, and we're going to continue forward, is acknowledging our Emancipation Day. So indentured laborers were freed on January 1st, 1920. And so January 1st, New Year's Day, is our Emancipation Day. And so, so we like to, we want to recognize that, and we want to celebrate that. And, historically, this isn't something that we've done before. We've never really, celebrated these national holidays or things like this that are tied to the island itself. It's been more so religious, just because, I don't really have an answer, but I think that my understanding of that, and what I think is because when our parents left, it was because they were essentially being pushed out, and to this day, there are still some issues of racism and classism in Fiji amongst the Indigenous community and the Indian community. And, when they left, I think they just kind of felt that as like, well, we're Fijians and we're proud to be Fijians, but we're here now and we're just going to leave that there. And there's sort of this, understanding or feeling that, like, we're this people of no nation. And we want to be the generation to be the ones who identify with that nation, because again, being twice removed kind of makes us feel like we don't really know where we're supposed to be, right? That's why we talk about no ties, right? We don't have any ties to India. We don't really feel like we have these ties to Fiji because we're here. But then here, again, being on this land, there's a challenging connection here because of the history of the way the Indigenous population were treated, and, cultural genocide, which Indo-Fijians certainly identify with as well, having been, taken and then put on this island to work, and then being pushed out and told that, they do not deserve equity or equal rights, and that, they're not going to, be held to the same class or standard as the Indigenous population. And so we're changing that for ourselves. We want to be able to identify with this island because our culture and our language and so much of what we do day to day just doesn't exist without identifying with our Fijianness.
Yeah. And I love that you're reframing it and reclaiming it for yourselves, for your community, for your families, for your generation. I think that's so powerful. As you're reclaiming your Fijianness, what things are you doing aside from your podcast, which we're going to talk about in a second? What things are you doing to bring you closer to Fijianness? And what is Fijianness looking like to you specifically?
So that's a really good question. And pretty much we're in the process of defining that and sort of creating that blueprint for us and for, generations moving forward, because it's not, it doesn't right now, because of us being twice removed and not necessarily, having this huge, strong community here, that, in our opinion, the Indo-Fijian community here has not identified with its Fijianness to date, and so I think we're kind of figuring that out right now. And to be Indo-Fijian and speak Fiji Baat means something different to all Indo-Fijians here. We haven't really found like a specific answer, but we're intentionally trying to figure that out by building community, by creating this synergy where other millennial Indo-Fijians can connect. And yeah, I think we're figuring that out right now.
Yeah, definitely building it as it happens. I think I don't know, it's definitely like kind of ingrained in my journey right now too, like that whole what is being a Fijian thing. Like I don't know, I get asked that sometimes, like, well, what, I don't know, I guess you kind of said that once, like, well, what's a Fijian supposed to look like? Well, I don't know, like I always say, like, well, it's supposed to look like you doing whatever the hell you want to do, right? Like, I don't know. I keep saying this, but like I got my damn boots and my like super kind of like I have this kind of like quote unquote Caucasian lifestyle. Or I don't know. I don't even know what to call it, but like Western lifestyle. But like I'm still a brown guy from Fiji, born there, practice these super like traditional things with my family and stuff. Like it's what you see in front of you.
Yeah.
The guy wearing a Stone Cold Steve Austin shirt, for crying out loud, who like also like, like does his best to try and not to eat meat on religious days, like I don't know, like we're just making it. And also with her and like her piercings and her tattoos and shit, like she's trying to like reclaim like that whole look of a Girmitia too.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's also being Fiji. Like I don't know. Like it's an amalgamation of like kind of like the Western stuff for us, because we're from here too, and then like being Fijian.
Yeah.
The key Fijian things, but then also adding to it too. Like we had the Independence Day thing, right? The hip hop show. I mean, we're trying to create things that are about Fiji that say like, this is
who we are, and we're here.
And we're here, and like come hang out, basically.
Yeah. Like, and that we are not a monolith. We are not the exact same as brown people from India. And that is important. And, we're not the exact same as the descendants of indentured laborers who were taken to the Caribbean or to South Africa or Seychelles or Suriname or Mauritius, right? Like everyone has their unique individual identity that's built into this intersection of where they ended up. And, that is something that has been a challenge for me growing up here with, us being in a white community, 20 to 30 minutes away from, the brown communities where, they try to judge our legitimacy. And, especially being here in Ladner, which was founded as a fishing and farming village during the gold rush, like it's pretty white here. Like, let's be real. It's white here. This place is a system of whiteness. And, while that has been awful at some points growing up, it certainly is still very much so built into the fabric of my identity. And it has been something that is pointed out to me as, something that I should be ashamed of. And I've felt that shame before, not growing up around my own people. But now I'm like, this is cool. Like I am always down for a party in a shop or a barn or in a field somewhere. Like that's just what we do here. It's a white town, and there's, this is just what happens, and it's who we are. We can't get away from it. Nor at this point do we want to. And so, this is who we are as Indo-Fijians. Other Indo-Fijians in the predominantly brown communities would probably say different. In California, where, some of our family is, they might identify differently because there's also this melting pot of Mexicans and Black people where some of our family are. And some of that is built into their identity. And the way that they celebrate Diwali is a little different because of these other individuals that attend their celebrations. And so, yeah, there's no one answer.
No, and I love that because, we can look at the answer. We can look at the answer. And take the answer, if there were to be one, as what it is. But the real joy is in the journey. And even if you never get to that answer, you are intentionally, using your word, you're intentional about defining something that even if you don't get a definition or a definition that other people find acceptable, who cares what other people think? You're still going through that process for yourself, and that process is the gold for me, I think.
Agreed. Yeah, this entire process, like, as we kind of said, we started the podcast we started talking about it in 2020, and then went for it in 2021, and this has been the most immersed and intentional we've been in learning about ourselves. And it is a journey, and it's so fascinating. Like, I have to say that this is just like the happiest, and I have to say, like, maybe most pleasant human I've ever been, because I'm just learning about myself, something that
Absolutely.
I feel like I had no idea about for a really long time.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. I'm having so much fun talking to you both, and I want this episode to go on forever. Because you're both so damn cool, and I am just like, oh my
Thanks,
God.
Al.
Thank
You're
you.
cool.
Such a fangirl right now. Tell us about your podcast. Tell us about your podcast. Tell us about some of the things that you talk about on the show. And most importantly, where we can listen to it and how we can find you on social media.
Totally. Well, our podcast is called NoTies1879. We started talking about it in 2020, as I said, and we launched in May of 2021 to be aligned with what is referred to as Girmit Day, or Indian Arrival Day in Fiji and parts of the South Pacific. May just signifies the day where a lot of the first ships carrying indentured laborers landed in the parts of the empire where they went to. And so, in the Caribbean, there's a few different days over the month where the boats began to arrive. And for us, it's May 14th, 1879. And so we put 1879 in the name to speak to that, the first year that the first boat arrived, because we wanted to highlight how recent that is. This is not something that was, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. This just happened. No Ties kind of speaks to our disconnect that we feel with the lands and the culture and, what we're trying to build. We're trying to build ties. And So, we mainly speak to, on the surface, we kind of speak about our racist experiences growing up in this white town. And then, through our own learning about our ancestry and our indentured labor ancestors who are called girmitias, we knew that we wanted to learn that, and we thought it would be cool to document it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we were just kind of doing all this learning. 2020 was a formative and weird year for all of us, right? And I started doing some introspection, and we started talking, and we were like, these conversations are like actually pretty cool. Not only are we talking about, our ancestral origins, but we're also kind of trying to dissect who we are and why it is the way that we are. Why are our parents the way that they are? What is the deal with intergenerational trauma? And, what is it that we see that's consistently being passed down and is essentially wreaking havoc in our families' lives and the lives of other Indo-Fijian families. And we kind of saw that all of this was so interconnected. And we were like, we should talk about this stuff and also record them and put it out into the world and see what happens. And, fortunately, we've had a lot of Indo-Fijians and other cultures, people of other cultures reach out to us and tell us that they really identify with the things that we're saying, because, we're definitely of a culture where speaking about, bad things is very taboo, pointing out things like narcissism and addiction and, the toxic traits that our culture has, is very taboo, and we don't do that. And so now that we're doing it, we're hoping to, break that cycle. We've had a lot of positive feedback because of that, which has been extremely validating, makes us feel like, okay, we're not crazy. Like, we're not these crazy brown people who grew up in a white town and just felt like it was just us. Like, there's others of us out there too. And, sort of the example that we are trying to set is that, we want to be the older siblings or the friends that we wish that we had when we were younger, because we didn't really have role models or, kind of anyone helping us out navigating this place, being who we are, looking how we are, and constantly being, told to, or reminded, that we're not from here and that we don't belong.
Yeah.
So yeah, the podcast, the crux of it is, we share all our racist experiences, and then we raise awareness about the indentured labor system and that it existed, because it's important for the wider world to know that it existed.
Where can we listen?
Everywhere. So we're on the Spotify. We are no longer on the SoundCloud, so sorry guys. Right? Not on the SoundCloud.
Yeah, we're on Spotify,
Apple Music or Apple Podcasts.
Yep.
Are we on the Audible as well?
Pretty much everywhere you get your podcasts, we're there. And
you can go to our Instagram page if y'all do have Instagram, and go to @NoTies1879 Podcast, and we have our solo link on there. Click on the solo link, and it'll actually show you everything we're up to right now. But also, we'll give you links to all of our episodes as well. Plus, from what I've been hearing, people have just been typing in, like, either one of our names, and the podcast has just been showing up. And I actually did this the other day. I just typed in my name just to see if there was anything greasy about me out there. And the podcast showed up, and it was the only thing that showed up. So
I'm okay with that. Yeah.
Google's got us covered now.
Awesome.
Like we're just getting hits like crazy. But also you can follow our individual Instagram accounts too. Always up to things. I'm at Ash Neil Prakash, and
I'm at Angeline KP on Instagram, and we are at NoTies1879 Podcast on Instagram and TikTok.
Awesome. TikTok too. Actually, I think I found you on TikTok first.
I feel like that's what tends to happen. TikTok is interesting.
I think I found you guys on TikTok. I think I found you both on TikTok first. And then I made like a beeline to find you on Instagram, subscribe to your podcast, and all of that good stuff. If anyone listening is like me and wants to make a beeline, just please check out the show notes where I will add information to all of No Ties 1879, and you'll be able to find them really quickly. Did I forget to mention anything? Is there anything else that either one of you would like to talk about?
I really love your podcast, Elle. I love that we can take something that maybe we didn't consider to be, you know, the entire like basis or topic of a podcast and like make it into a podcast. And I absolutely love this medium because we're able to, you know, have this agency in sharing information and knowledge. And yeah, I thank you for making Speaking Tongues, because I have been through quite a few episodes and learned so much. And I think it is so cool that you'd find folks of all different languages and invite them to share about it. And like that you asked us, like Fiji Baat is like, you know, a point barely percent.
Language.
Yeah. And like we appreciate it so much because the folks that you have had on the podcast are like just incredible people who have accomplished so many things, and it feels really good to kind of be alongside that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, because, you know, this is what I want Speaking Tongues to be about. I mean, I could probably make a podcast about the 10 most popular languages in the world, or the most, you know, spoken languages in Western Europe, but I don't want to do that. And I think there are plenty of other people doing, doing their thing. But for me, it's about taking a language like Fiji Baat and putting it alongside a language like Mandarin, like a language like, you know, that's more widely spoken or more widely studied, because I want people to know and recognize and understand and appreciate that all language is valuable. And I don't want to ever hear anybody say, this is not a real language, my language is broken, my language is not real. No, it is. And this is a language that, you know, you know, in your case, like I said, this is a language that is your history. This is your living history, and that is so important. And I hope that people listening have taken that away from this episode.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
this is, you know, maybe my way of like being able to elevate everyone, you know, like a rising tide lifts all boats, and I want my show to be a rising tide. So I thank you both for making the time to come and talk. Yeah, I want to thank you both again for this conversation. And, you know, we've been talking for a while, so I'm going to wrap this up, but thank you so much for chatting with me. And I like to end each episode on the same question, just to have a little fun. I end each episode on this same question. Do you have any jokes, popular sayings, tongue twisters, cool slang words, idioms, words of wisdom, or words of advice in Fiji Baat to share and perhaps to teach us?
In Fiji Baat?
I have like a bit of like a funny.
Yeah, I got nothing, so we'll leave this with you.
So when we were kids, and you know, say we were like at the store or like just driving down the street, and like someone would be like crossing the road or I don't know, just holding you up in some way, or just something like
being
that.
Annoying.
My parents used to have this saying that they would say, "Uske baap ke rasta hai," which means, is this their dad's road? And, you know, meaning that like, you know, this person's so entitled, like, let's go, or let's, you know, you're not doing the thing you're supposed to be doing, kind of thing. And, you know, it wasn't until we got older where we were like, that literally means like, you know, it's referring to privilege and entitlement and, you know, white people displaying that. And so, you know, like sometimes we'll be in the car or whatever, and like, you know, like Ash will be driving, and you know, this will happen, and then, you know, we'll be getting frustrated, and I'll be like, well, uske baap ke rasta hai, saying like, well,
Yeah.
it's his dad's road, so
Yeah.
what are we gonna do, you know? And that is a super Fijian thing.
It's funny because I get mad at people for doing that, and then I'll go and do the same thing. I'll see my friend in traffic, and he'll ride up next to me on his bike. I'll drop the window down, and we'll both be just taking up the whole road, having a conversation with each other, causing a traffic jam. And, you know, I kind of do the same thing, too. And, yeah, it's my dad's road.
Yeah.
Know why? 'Cause
Yeah.
I said it is.
Yeah.
Can you
so
teach
that's
me
one.
that? Can you teach me to say that phrase?
Yeah. Okay. So, I don't know exactly which one, but a dialect of Hindi, in that dialect, the word for father is bap. So
Bap.
like BAAP, bap.
Okay, I'm gonna write this
So-
down phonetically.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes. And then is ke. So KE, which we pronounce like ke. That's like
Put an accent over the E.
ke.
Yeah.
I guess so. Yeah, and that's like
Yeah,
I
like
don't know
Pokemon.
of or it's hard to translate, but I
Yeah.
think it would be like maybe of. And then rasta is road. And I just spell rasta like rasta. Honestly, RASTA. And then he is and he is a weird one because I've seen it spelt like
HAI
HAI.
and
Yeah.
then HE, but I think we can probably go with HE accent over the E. The accent's important. We can use this. It means what it means in this
Yeah.
case.
But
The
usually
eh.
but yeah, I've seen it as HAI.
That says hi, oh hi, which is not to me right. I think it should be HE accent over the E.
So altogether, it's Bap ke rasta hai, which means like that's, and then you can say it like in different ways.
Yeah, you
like,
could say ter, which means like your, and now it's kind of like if you say it the right way, it could sound super disrespectful. So you say ter bap ke rasta hai, which is very like.
but that's not really
pointed.
that's not really like Fiji Baat.
No,
that's
that's-
more, that's something that's like more Punjabi, I think
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
say. But
So
But it
I would
sounds
say
very like it's harder, like it's more aggressive. I think
it's pointed.
I say that
yeah.
sometimes too.
So I would say "Bap ke rasta hai."
Yo, that was
yeah,
good.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah, my
That was
first
pretty
sentence.
Yeah. And then in the beginning, if you wanted, you could throw in like uske, which means like theirs, like it, like, so again, it doesn't perfectly translate, and it's a mashing of a couple words into one, but we would say uske baap ke rasta hai, which means it's their dad's road, and then hama baap ke rasta hai, which means it's my dad's road. So the proper word is hamar or hamara or hamari, depending on like who you are. But in Fiji Baat, we, completely like break that down to just hama.
Mhm.
And then it's mine. Yeah.
I love that.
That one's my favorite one.
I love that. That's a good one to use while driving, I think.
Yeah,
Well-
it is.
Ange and Ash and Ange, thank you again for this conversation. I had so much fun, and I have so much more that I want to know. I will
We'll
not
stay in
ask you
touch.
at this point because I think I've kept you for long enough. But thank you so much again for this conversation. Really quickly, if we were, similar to now, we've been talking for quite some time. In Fiji Bot, what is the best way to say goodbye? We're going our separate ways. What's the best way in Fiji Bot to say goodbye?
Oh, you could probably say bula.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, bula is so like I mentioned before, it's a KVT word. It's kind of similar to saying shalom. Like it's
Yeah, it's
hello
a
and goodbye.
salutation.
It's just a salutation, right? You could say that. Or
Yeah.
if you're like super Hindi, you could say namaste or ram ram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, we could say like namaste, which is like,
That's super traditional.
could be you.
That's-
Yeah. And again, you're going to use that in a specific setting,
Yeah.
right? Like if you go to a prayer or something or not, like, South Indians would say namaskaram.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
something that we might say just day to day is fir milyo, which is I'll see you again.
Fir milio?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Fir milyo.
Wait.
Yeah. Like we'll see you
Fir-
again or we'll meet again.
Fir milio. And
Yes.
It is
ash.
again, and then milio is to meet.
Yeah.
Fir milio. Thank you so much again. And I'll be talking to you soon. Bye.
Thanks for
Thanks so
having
much,
us.
Elle.
New episodes of Speaking Tongues are available every Monday, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to like and share episodes with other language lovers like ourselves. Ciao!